There's a decision happening on hundreds of millions of computers right now, and most people do not even realize they are the ones making it. Windows 10 officially died on October 14th, 2025. No more free security patches. No more routine fixes for the holes hackers. Find every single week. And here's the part that should genuinely worry you. Even after that date passed, independent trackers still showed a massive share of the world's desktop computers running that exact same operating system, completely unprotected, completely exposed. While their owners had absolutely no idea the safety net had already been pulled out from under them, Microsoft gave people a narrow set of options. Pay for something called extended security updates, buy an entirely new computer that meets the strict hardware requirements for Windows 11, or just keep going without protection and hope nothing bad happens. And then, quietly, in late June of 2026, Microsoft did something almost nobody expected. Without a press conference, without a big announcement, they extended the free consumer ESU coverage window all the way out to October 12th, 2027, burying the change inside a routine blog post edit. Think about that for a second. A trillion-dollar company just admitted, indirectly, that the transition away from Windows 10 is going so badly that they had to buy themselves and their users another full year. That is not a company confident in its own roadmap. That is a company managing a slow-motion crisis. So if you are sitting there right now on a Windows 10 machine, wondering what your next move should be, you are not alone, and you are not behind. You are actually standing at the exact same crossroads as an enormous portion of the planet's computer users. And there is a third path that almost nobody is talking about loudly enough. A path that does not require you to abandon Windows. Why so many people are quietly making the switch. And exactly how you can do it yourself without losing anything you already rely on. Let's talk about what has actually been happening beneath the surface. Because the numbers here tell a story that mainstream tech coverage has been strangely slow to pick up on. According to StatCounter's own tracked data through the first half of 2026, Linux desktop usage has been sitting in the range of roughly 3% worldwide, and depending on which month you check, it has occasionally pushed higher. Now, 3% might sound small to you, and taken on its own, maybe it is. But context matters here, and the context is staggering. Back in the middle of 2022, that number was closer to 2.5%. The United States crossed the 5% threshold for desktop Linux usage for the very first time in June of 2025, a milestone that had never happened before in the history of the platform. India, meanwhile, is sitting above 16%, driven by cost sensitivity and a massive developer population that grew up on open source tools. And here's the number that really should catch your attention if you are into gaming at all. Valve's own Steam hardware survey recorded Linux hitting 5.33% of active Steam users in March of 2026, the single highest gaming share Linux has ever recorded on that platform in the entire history of the Steam Deck and Proton compatibility layer combined. That is not a fluke. That is not statistical noise. That is a trend line, and trend lines do not lie. Something is shifting, quietly, methodically, month after month, and the timing lines up perfectly with the Windows 10 shutdown and the ongoing frustration millions of people feel toward Windows 11's constant nagging, its AI integration nobody asked for, and its hardware restrictions that lock out machines that still work perfectly. Fine. So why isn't everybody just switching over completely? Why hasn't Linux exploded to 20, 30, 40% if it's genuinely this good? Because there is a real, legitimate reason people hesitate. And it has nothing to do with fear or stubbornness. It has to do with software. Maybe you use a specific accounting program for your job that only exists on Windows. Maybe you have thousands of dollars sunk into games with anti-cheat systems that still do not play nicely with Linux. Maybe there's a piece of software from a decade ago that your entire workflow depends on, and there is no equivalent anywhere else. These are not excuses. These are real, practical barriers that block millions of people from making a full jump, no matter how many YouTube comments tell them to just switch already. Isn't that right? There is exactly why dual booting exists, and exactly why it has quietly become the answer that nobody bothered to explain properly until now. Away from this video understanding exactly what we're talking about. Right now, when you press the power button on your computer, it boots straight into Windows. That's the only thing it knows how to do. Dual booting changes that completely. We take your existing hard drive, and instead of touching or deleting anything that's already there, we carve out a separate, dedicated section of free space. Into that space, we install a full, complete, fully functional second operating system. Windows keeps its space. Linux gets its own space. They live side by side on the same physical drive. They never interfere with each other. And every single time you turn your computer on, a small menu appears before anything else loads, asking you which operating system you'd like to use today. You pick one, you press enter, and later that it's not for you. You can boot back into Windows, open disk management, delete the Linux partition, and reclaim that space like nothing ever happened. If you fall in love with Linux instead, you can eventually give the whole drive over to it. Nothing about this is permanent unless you decide to make it permanent. Now, before you touch anything, there is one step that I need you to take seriously, because skipping it is how people end up in genuinely stressful situations. Back up your data. I know you've heard this warning 100 times in 100 different tech videos, and I know it feels like a formality, but partition changes, while statistically very safe, are not risk-free. If something goes wrong, and it rarely does, but if it does, you do not want to be the person who lost a decade of family. Photos because they skipped a 20-minute backup. Plug in an external drive, upload your important files to a cloud service, or ideally do both. If everything goes smoothly, and it almost certainly will, you've spent 20 minutes you didn't strictly need to spend. If something goes sideways, that 20 minutes just saved your entire digital life. That trade is worth making every single time, no exceptions. Once your data is backed up, you'll need a handful of things ready before you start. First, a USB flash drive, at least 8 gigabytes, and understand that this drive is going to be completely wiped during the process, so do not use one with anything important still on it. Second, free space on your hard drive. 30 gigabytes is the technical minimum, but I would strongly encourage you to give Linux somewhere between 60 and 100 gigabytes if your drive allows it, because once you start actually using this second operating system, you will want room for software, files, and updates. Third, a stable internet connection to download the installer file, which sits at roughly 3 gigabytes depending on... Now let's talk about which version of Linux you should actually download, because this is where most beginners freeze up completely. The moment you search for the best Linux distribution for beginners, you get hit with a wall of names: Ubuntu, Fedora, Manjaro, Arch, Zorin, Debian, and a dozen others. And every single online community will insist their favorite is objectively the correct choice. I'm going to cut through that noise for you. For someone coming from Windows who wants something that simply works without a steep learning curve, Linux Mint remains the strongest recommendation available in 2026. Specifically, the current stable release as of this year is Linux Mint 22.3, codenamed Xena, which the project officially released in January of 2026, built on the long-term support base of Ubuntu 24.04, meaning it will continue receiving updates for years to come. The Mint team has actually confirmed that their next major release, version 23, has been deliberately delayed until around Christmas of 2026, specifically so the development team can slow down, fix long-standing bugs, and refine the desktop experience, rather than rushing out a new version on the usual schedule. What that means for you right now today is that Mint 22.3 is not some outdated placeholder waiting to be replaced. It is a mature, actively supported, thoroughly polished release that the developers themselves are treating as their flagship for the foreseeable future. The Cinnamon desktop environment that ships with it looks and behaves remarkably close to classic Windows, with a start menu in the corner, a taskbar along the bottom, and system tray icons exactly where you'd expect them. Most people coming from Windows feel oriented within a couple of minutes, not hours. To get it, you head to the official Linux Mint website, click download, and choose the Cinnamon edition, which is the most polished and modern looking of the available desktop options, and works well on the vast majority of computers built within the last decade. Once that download finishes, you'll need a separate free tool to turn your USB drive into a bootable installer, and while the Mint website itself points people toward Balena Etcher, a tool called Rufus has consistently proven more reliable in practice for a huge number of users, and it takes only a few clicks to use correctly. Once Rufus has finished writing the Linux Mint installer onto your flash drive, there's one more piece of preparation worth doing before you restart your computer, and that's creating the actual space where Linux is going to live. Yes, the installer itself can technically carve out this space automatically during setup, but doing it manually inside Windows first gives you full control over exactly how much room you're handing over, and it removes a lot of the guesswork that makes people nervous. Right-click on your Windows Start menu and open Disk Management. You'll see a visual layout of every drive connected to your computer. Find your main drive, the one carrying your Windows installation, right-click on it, and select Shrink Volume. Windows will calculate how much space is available to free up, and then ask you how many megabytes you'd like to shrink it by. Remember that 1 gigabyte equals roughly 1,024 megabytes. So if you want to hand Linux 60 gigabytes of room, you'd type in approximately 61,440. Confirm the shrink, let Windows process it for a minute or two, and once it's done, you'll see a new section of your drive labeled as unallocated space. That's it. You don't need to format it, name it, or configure it further. Close Disk Management, and you're ready to restart. Now comes the part that makes some people nervous. telling your computer to boot from the USB drive instead of jumping straight into Windows like it normally does. There are two reliable ways to do this. If you're already inside Windows, hold down the Shift key, click the Start menu, select Power, and choose Restart while continuing to hold Shift. Your computer will land on a blue recovery screen. From there, choose Use a Device, select your USB drive from the list, and your computer will restart directly into the Linux installer. The alternative method, useful if your system is already off or unresponsive, is to restart normally and repeatedly press a specific function key the instant you see your manufacturer's logo appear. That key varies depending on your hardware, commonly F12, F9, F2, or Escape. So if you're not sure which one applies to your machine, a quick search for your specific model number will tell you. Either path leads to the same destination, the Linux Mint logo appearing on a black screen, followed by an option to start Linux Mint. Let it load, and within moments you'll find yourself sitting inside a fully functional Linux desktop, running entirely from the USB drive itself, without having touched your hard drive in any way yet. This is what's known as a live session, and I want you to treat it as your free trial before committing to anything. Take 10 or 15 minutes here. Connect to your Wi-Fi using the network icon in the corner. Open a web browser and load a few pages. Check whether your trackpad, your sound, and your keyboard all respond the way you expect. This live session is essentially a dress rehearsal, letting you confirm that your specific hardware plays nicely with Linux before you ever install a single file permanently. If everything behaves normally here, it will behave normally after installation too. Once you're confident everything is working, look for an icon on the desktop labeled Install Linux Mint and double-click it. The installer will walk you through a series of straightforward screens, starting with your preferred language and keyboard layout. When you reach the screen asking whether you'd like to install multimedia codecs, check that box, because it's what allows videos, music, and various file formats to work correctly without extra hassle later. Then you'll arrive at the single most important screen in the entire installation, the one labeled Installation Type. Read it carefully. You're looking for the option that says Install Linux Mint alongside Windows Boot Manager. That is the dual boot option, and that is the one you want. Under absolutely no circumstances should you select the option that says Erase Disk and Install Linux Mint, because that choice will permanently wipe your existing Windows installation, along with every file, program, and license tied to it. Select the alongside option, confirm, and the installer will show you a visual representation of your drive, correctly identifying the unallocated space you created earlier and preparing to use it. From there, you'll be asked for basic setup details, your time zone, your name, a username in all lowercase letters, and a password you'll remember, since you'll need it whenever the system requires administrative permission. The actual installation process typically takes somewhere between 10 and 25 minutes, depending on your hardware. And once it completes, you'll be prompted to restart your computer and remove the installation media. Here comes the moment that makes this entire process worthwhile. Your computer restarts, and instead of jumping straight into Windows like it always has, a new screen appears listing Linux Mint at the top and Windows Boot Manager just beneath it. That's grub, and from this point forward, every time you power on your machine, it will ask you which operating system you'd like to use. Need Linux today? Select it. Need that one Windows-only program for work? Select Windows instead. Both. Systems remain fully intact, fully functional, coexisting peacefully on hardware you already own, with zero interference between them and zero compromise on either side. One common concern worth addressing directly: will this slow your computer down or wear out your hard drive? Faster? No, on both counts. Windows and Linux never run simultaneously, they simply take turns using the same hardware, so there's no performance penalty on either side. The only real trade-off is storage space. Whatever you allocate to Linux is no longer available to Windows, which is exactly why planning that allocation properly at the start matters so much. Now let's address the question that's probably been sitting in the back of your mind this entire time, the one that stops more people from trying this than any technical fear ever could. What happens to all of your Windows software once you're running Linux day to day? Because I told you at the very beginning of this video that you would not have to give up anything you've already paid for, and I meant that. But it's worth walking through exactly how that promise plays out in practice, because there are actually several layers to it, and understanding all of them will completely change how confident you feel making this move. The simplest layer, and the one that requires zero extra setup, is the dual boot itself. If you have a Windows-only program you need for work, whether that's a piece of accounting software, an industry-specific tool, or a legacy application from years ago that simply refuses to die, you restart your computer, select Windows from that grub menu we talked about, use the program exactly as you always have, and then restart back into Linux whenever you're finished. That's the entire point of everything we just built together. You are never locked out of Windows. It is sitting right there on your drive, fully intact, waiting whenever you need it. The second layer is a piece of technology called Wine, which is a compatibility tool that allows a surprising number of Windows programs to run directly inside Linux without needing to boot into Windows at all. It isn't flawless, and not every single application plays nicely with it. But for a huge range of older software, and even a fair number of modern applications, Wine performs far better than most people expect. There's also a companion tool called Bottles that simplifies the process considerably for beginners, handling a lot of the technical configuration behind the scenes, so you don't have to dig through forums trying to figure out obscure settings. The third layer, and honestly the one that's changed the most dramatically over the past couple of years, is gaming. Valve has poured enormous engineering resources into a compatibility layer called Proton, built directly into Steam, and the results speak for themselves. And we already touched on the fact that Steam's own hardware survey recorded Linux hitting 5.33% of active users in March of 2026, the highest share ever recorded on that platform. And a huge portion of that growth is being driven by exactly how well Proton handles modern Windows games. Thousands upon thousands of titles now run smoothly on Linux through Steam without any manual configuration at all. Competitive titles with aggressive anti-cheat systems remain the main holdout, since some anti-cheat vendors still haven't built proper Linux support, but for the overwhelming majority of single-player games, and a growing number of multiplayer ones as well, gaming on Linux in 2026 is no longer the compromise it used to be, even just a couple of years ago. And if you happen to own a Steam Deck, you're already running a Linux-based system without even realizing it, which tells you just how far this technology has quietly matured while nobody outside the community was paying attention. The fourth and most advanced layer, for anyone who truly cannot get a specific Windows program working through Wine, is running Windows inside a virtual machine using free tools like VirtualBox. This essentially lets you run a complete isolated copy of Windows inside a window on your Linux desktop, though it does require more system resources and a slightly steeper learning curve. So it's generally a fallback option rather than a first choice for most people starting out. Now, before I let you go, I want to leave you with something a little more honest than the usual wrap-up you get at the end of these videos. Linux is not perfect. There will be moments where something doesn't behave exactly the way you expect, and there will be moments where the fix requires a quick search or a forum post rather than an obvious button somewhere in a settings menu. That's fine. That's normal. You spent years learning how Windows works down to its smallest quirks, and you're not going to master an entirely new system in a single weekend, and you shouldn't expect to. Be patient with yourself the same way you'd want anyone else to be patient while learning something new. And one small piece of advice, be selective about where you go looking for help online. Certain corners of the internet can be surprisingly unkind to newcomers asking basic questions, so stick to official documentation, the Linux Mint community forums, and creators who are actually interested in teaching rather than gatekeeping. Here's the bigger picture I want you to sit with as this video wraps up. Windows 10 support technically ended back in October of 2025, and even though Microsoft quietly extended free security coverage out to October of 2027, that extension is exactly what it sounds like, a temporary bridge, not a long-term solution, and definitely not a reason to stop thinking about what comes next for the computer sitting in front of you right now. Linux, meanwhile, has spent the better part of the last 3 years quietly climbing, crossing 5% in the United States, crossing 16% in India, and recently hitting record numbers even inside the gaming world through Steam. None of that happened by accident, and none of it requires you to throw away hardware that still works perfectly well or to abandon software you've relied on for years. Dual booting sits precisely at the intersection of those two realities, giving you the security and modern breathing room of Linux, alongside the full, uncompromised backward compatibility of Windows on the exact same machine without spending a single additional dollar. Your computer is not obsolete just because a company on the other side of the country decided it should be. You get to decide that, not them. If this video actually helped you understand your options a little better, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment letting me know which distribution you're planning to try first, because that engagement genuinely helps this information reach the next person sitting on a Windows 10 machine wondering what to do next. Take the keys back to your own computer. You've earned them.